Poverty is quite simply not having enough money to meet the basic necessities of life, not being able to afford decent housing, food, clothing, transportation costs, not really having enough. Poverty is not an issue which we talk about in women's terms until women put it on the agenda to be discussed. What we're saying is that we have to infiltrate everywhere, and we have to put these issues on the agenda, because that's the only time they get there. Now, there are approximately 270 young women in this audience this morning. I want you to turn around and take a good look at each other. Because, in fact, what you may be doing when you do that is looking at some of the members of Canada's poor in the future. What can we do to show you that because society has not taken steps to redress it, poverty has become a woman's issue? Maybe in our shame, we, your elders, have kept that fact a secret. But it is not a secret anymore. 60% of the poorest people in this country are women. Old women, divorced women, teenage single mothers, widows, and women married to poor men. What that means is that it's possible that 160 of you sitting here this morning, whatever your class, whatever your background, could be poor in the future. The poorest of you, who will be poorest for the longest time, of course, will be those of you who become single parents, especially if you become single parents in your teens. None of these facts make you unique or special in any way, nor is the incidence of poverty among women a new phenomenon. It's part of our history. In Canada, the majority of women who work were and still are poor. One of the earliest job ghettos for women was domestic service. It was the kind of work that condemned women to miserable pay and long hours, as it does today. Many women took in boarders and toiled over other people's laundry, anything to supplement their husband's income. 100 years ago, we were a rural society. Life on a farm meant long, hard, back-breaking work. Farm women were poor, as many still are today, but at least they were self-sufficient. Industrialization fostered another kind of poverty as families flocked to the cities to work in factories. Mothers were often forced to leave their children at home to fend for themselves. The result was an economic crisis for women that has yet to be resolved as they struggled with their responsibilities at home and at work. employers conveniently considered these women unskilled, even though most had been trained since childhood to cook and to sew and to preserve food. Some bosses paid their women employees as little as $4 for a 70-hour week. And do you know what the employers did? They reported that they liked having women do these jobs because they were cheap, docile, and dependable. They were dependable because they were dispensable. In the high-rolling 20s, work was plentiful. Many single girls moved to the city to work as office clerks and secretaries. Telephone operators wore roller skates to keep up with the frantic pace of business. But when the Great Depression of the 30s hit, a great many women lost their jobs. Their tentative status in the workplace was swept away during a time of hunger and homelessness for many. Then came the Second World War.
Behind the great embarkations of troops for the fighting fronts, behind them are the women of our nation.
Ironically, the war was good to working women. With the men fighting overseas, women began to play a role in running the country, working in industry and the military. But when the war ended, women were given the pink slip with matching stockings.
One by one, wartime controls and restrictions were lifted. And women could be women once again. And to one long squeal of delight, the good old days were back.
I can't reach out there, can you?
Once again, women were slotted back into their traditional roles as dependent wives and mothers. And for poor women, nothing changed. By the end of the 50s, more married and middle-class women were entering the workplace. And in the 60s and 70s, they began fighting for a voice in the labor unions. The 60s gave birth to the women's liberation movement. Women would no longer tolerate unequal pay scales and gender discrimination. Despite some significant gains, our ideal of equality has yet to be legislated. And for poor women, the important changes have barely begun. Today, women are still working at the lowest paid, the lowest skilled, and the least secure jobs. Most of them still working at minimum wage with no chance of promotion, and of course, their salary is still mistakenly regarded as the second income in the family, the money that's used to buy the little bit of extras and the frills. The Canadian reality is that there are over 500,000 single-parent families in this country.
Has more bread?
85% of them headed by single mothers, 60% of whom live below the poverty line and do not have enough money to pay rent, to buy food, or to meet the other basic needs.
Would you like some diapers for the kids?
Yes, please.
You want a pup?
To these women, new clothes, a movie, a concert, buying makeup, these are all luxuries which they can no longer even budget for. The Canadian reality also is that married women in this country today can expect to outlive their husbands by about 10 years.
Now get in there. Stay there. Here you go. Are you there? Come on.
They should be happy years.
Come on, nobody's gonna.
But in fact, those 10 years of widowhood, most of them will experience a drop in income and a standard of living, and often they will end their lives living alone on inadequate pensions. It is disheartening to us, and here I speak for the grandmothers and mothers of today. It is disheartening to us that you're still becoming pregnant in your teens, that you're still dropping out of school, that 1 out of every 10 teenage girls in the city of Toronto becomes pregnant before she's age 20. And that for Canada, the statistic is not much better. It's 1 out of every 25. You are actually romanticizing the years of loneliness and isolation that unpreparedness for parenting has in store for you. That you are failing to acknowledge that for you the parties and the fun and the games cease, and that usually the mother could find herself truly alone, trapped in a life of drudgery, uneducated, unskilled, unprepared to do battle and to overcome the overwhelming and crushing poverty which will envelop you. Here in North America, we know that one of the contributing factors to our poverty as women has been the socialization which has led us to believe that because we're women, we're going to be taken care of, first by our fathers, then by our loving husbands and partners. And each new generation of young women settle for incomplete education, short-term jobs, ignorance about money matters, and dream of marriage, ensuring happiness ever after. So we have romance novels and rock videos and the movies, advertising and the media, even some religious and educational institutions teaching us as women how to wait for the right man with the right size wallet to come along, and how to lay in wait, preparing our bodies and our wilds, just marking time, never taking our rights nor our responsibilities seriously. These institutions construct a mask and hide the reality of our poverty, exploitation, but most of all, of our wasted potential. The Canadian reality is that for every 5 of you who get married, 2 of you will be divorced. 75% of you who divorce will be unable to collect support and maintenance payments, since that is the percentage of men who actually default on their payments. The standard of living of a woman drops by as much as 73% when she is divorced. And life for her and for her children become bleak, as they suddenly have to do without so many of the things which they had taken for granted, things which gave quality to their lives. Now, this is not an audience of females only, so a word or two to the 100 or so young men who are present. I say to you that if you settle for incomplete education and short-term jobs, you too are going to be part of Canada's poor. However, the reality is that only 14% of you will be single parents. And in fact, your standard of living will actually rise by 42% if you experience a divorce. Now, why is there a difference? One reason for this is that males do not design their lives around the prospect of being swept off their feet by a rich wife, a rich and beautiful wife, who will love and support them till death do they part. They may wish, but they don't sit and wait. From early childhood, our society teaches and prepares its male members not only to take responsibility for themselves, but for all their dependents as well. They are trained and programmed to be decision makers and power brokers. They are prepared to be rich. Now, I can almost hear you thinking that what I'm saying is that a woman has to sacrifice love and marriage and pursue a career in order to ensure financial security throughout her life. Not true. Not true at all. Because with the right partner, love is sustained, not drained by independence. And such a union is strengthened, not weakened by equality.
But Ruby's bear was too tickly for Max to sleep with.
And remember that in these changing times, today's children need parents who are intelligent and open to knowledge to prepare them for the challenges of the 21st century. So if we accept that the function of an education is to teach us to think, to analyze, and to make choices, then a person who is educated should be able to question decision makers, should be able to do more than just survive. We have to get the best education that is available, and we have to have long-term goals. We have to start by developing our potential to its absolute fullest. For although the equation is not necessarily that education equals wealth, it is almost always true that for women, the lack of an education equals poverty. Now, the more analytical among you will tell me that poverty is not a personal aberration, nor is it always the fault of the individual. And of course, you're right, and I agree with you. We depend on poverty too much in our economy for it to just disappear, but this cycle has to be broken. The feminization of poverty is a tragedy. It is a crisis which must be dealt with firmly and openly now. All of which is by way of saying that you can turn this around. You are the generation which opened your wallets and your hearts to the starving children of this world when they needed you. You are the generation which marches for peace and speaks out against injustice. You see and understand the beauty and fragility of our planet, and you care enough to strive to protect it. You are also better informed, you have more resources, you have more ability, you are more tolerant of people's differences, and you actually have a better foundation on which to build than we, your elders, did. And I have confidence that you will take control of your lives as you carefully, lovingly, yet firmly turn this world around until it reflects your highest aspirations and your dreams. Thank you.
You've been stressing formal education. What about non-traditional jobs for women, such as plumbing and welding?
I see that as part of an education. I am not confining myself to a university education. I think any kind of skill which you develop, that is part of your education. Now, I do not subscribe to the school of thought, which is that women are going to be poor until they go into non-traditional jobs. I think that the work that women do is very valuable, and it's about time we got paid the true value for that job. But those women who want to do non-traditional work, that's their business.
In reading the statistics about women in poverty, motherhood seems to be a real issue. And I was wondering whether we should be encouraging men to spend more time in the household, or whether or not that would cut motherhood short. Do you understand what I mean?
Actually, I say to my sons, parenting, cooking, washing, cleaning, doing the kinds of household tasks which women do are the quality tasks that make our lives pleasant. And there isn't any reason why men shouldn't learn to do these things, because in fact, they are richer when they know how to do these tasks. So what I say to my son is, the reason I want you to learn to be independent, because this is a problem that men have too, you know. We never talk to them about how dependent they are on us, because we don't want to bruise their egos. You know, you should learn to be independent so that you can take care of yourself, so that you don't rush out and get married because you need somebody to take care of you. That's the reason I'm asking you to cook tonight's dinner.
I was wondering, you were talking before about how women only do clerical work and how very few women are in positions such as managers. But I was wondering, how are women supposed to receive these positions when the majority of the people who do the promotion are men?
The kind of respect that women are seeking in the job market will not come about until the consciousness of men has been raised. So feminism is not really just a women's issue. It affects both women and men. We are moving into arenas which were formerly considered to be male preserves. And men are going to be uncomfortable with that. But certainly, once we get more men involved in the dialogue, we will find that it will be less difficult for women to get the kinds of promotions in the job market that will eventually result in true equality for both of them. This doesn't mean that women have to sit and wait, of course. While we are waiting for men to get on with this business of raising their consciousness, we are all educating ourselves like crazy. And we could, in fact, end up taking over. We could be in control. Just a word to the wise, okay?
When women are working and they have to take a maternity leave, how does that affect their career?
That's something that everyone is wrestling with now. What we're going to do, I suspect, not my generation but yours, is really change the shape and face of the workplace, because we're going to insist our right to be mothers be protected, and we're also going to insist that our right to work be protected. Certainly, one of the avenues open to us, which we have not explored fully enough, is fathers taking on more responsibility for parenting.
You've told us what percentage of people under the poverty line are women. But I was wondering, what percentage of the people with the sort of wealth and power to change things in this country are women?
Are women?
Yes, like in the top income brackets.
I haven't got that statistic, but I'm going to make one up, and I would suspect that it's approximately 0.1% of women who actually have that kind of power. There are so few of us that we're almost invisible. It would be nice if we could get a few more women on the Supreme Court so that there's more balance in terms of decisions which they hand down.
As a member of a women's issues at my school, I've noticed that feminism, which is associated with this topic, often carries certain negative images with many of the students. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about how to motivate these students into getting involved.
We have to be absolutely firm in our commitment to the women's struggle, and just to persevere. And when asked the question, are you a feminist? We have to be upfront and honest about it. I am a feminist. I am concerned about the liberation of women and the equality of all people. But in fact, what we're dealing with here is a revolution. We're trying to bring an end to exploitation and oppression, and we can't stop now. I mean, we would be remiss if we started retreating now and saying, we've changed our minds. We no longer want to be a part of where the decisions are made, that we want to go back to being dependent and exploited full-time. We can't do that now because that would not be fair to you. It would not be fair to the world. Okay?
What can women do collectively as a group in order to ensure that they get a fairer return for their labor?
Continue the struggle, put our items on the agenda, insist that governments listen to what we have to say and deal with it. And actually the most efficient way of doing that is getting into the political arena yourself. And I know that this is not a political speech and that I should not be here recruiting you, but I'm telling you that's where the decisions are made about the quality and the lack of quality in the educational system. It's where decisions are made about what kinds of jobs you have or whether there are any jobs for you when you get out of school. Decisions are made about whether there is housing, whether there is adequate health care, whether in fact you are able to live in peace in this world or not. They're made in the political arena. And every time I hear someone say to me, I'm not interested in politics, I know I'm listening to a fool. And if all of you would decide to run for political office and try to change some of the injustices which we've had to live with over the past 2,000 years, this would be a better world to live in than it now is.